And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
And if we're talking tight ends and we're going into round 2, maybe round 3, give me Ian Thomas, please. Let's just do the damn thing.
Just based on giving his overall ability. Again, I like his arm. I think he can make every throw.
The pick at number 12 is in.
And we're back, Cover One, the Draft Podcast. I'm Russell Brown. Joining me, as always, CP Christian Page. CP, how we doing, my man?
Doing good. Always good to be talking football with you, Russ.
Absolutely, brother. You guys staying safe down there in Alabama? Are the cases increased like they are in Michigan? We are actually shut down from the last time we spoke.
Yeah, we're not technically shut down. I mean, a lot of the restaurants and places, they're just doing the curbside service. So, you can't get in large groups of people. But, the county that I live in is actually the second highest rate in the state. So I am not leaving my house except to walk my dog. So that's pretty much all I've been doing. So, it's definitely serious, yo. The quicker we actually take, the right precautionary steps, the quicker we can get back to normal life. So there's my political take for the day. What the government is saying, please do it so we can get back to normal life.
Yes, I miss sports so bad. I mean, we would have opening day in baseball today, and we don't have that. But we do have NFL drafts, so that's what we are going to do. If you guys want to stay up to date with everything NFL draft, everything deep X's and O's film type of content, then you need to download the Cover One app. You can simply do it for free. Just go to your app store, search Cover One. You will find the app. Just click download and install, and you'll be all set. All of our content will be at the palm of your hand. Make sure you get the push notifications, so every time Christian, myself, whoever at Cover One drops some new content, you will go ahead and get that push notification, and that article will pop up immediately for you. Recently, Zach Hicks has been doing a great job with these film sessions, these interviews with a ton of 2020 NFL draft prospects, so you can't miss that. So do that today. Download the Cover One app for free. So what we're bringing you today is a kind of a little mix of everything. We're not going to go into a ton of we will, but we're not going to go into a ton of first-round NFL draft discussion. I mean, I don't think we need to sit here and talk about Joe Burrow much longer or Chase Young or anything like that. We are now getting into the deeper portion of our film dives and evaluations. So we'll talk about some players that we've recently studied over the last couple of days. I think we're going to be talking primarily offensive linemen for that portion of the show. And then we'll do a conference or a division breakdown. And we'll start in the AFC North since the Bengals have the first pick. So we will do a kind of draft options. I will be doing written pieces for this on cover1.net, but you guys will get the audio version from CP and myself through the AFC North and every other division between now and the draft. So we'll do the AFC North today with the Bengals, Steelers, Browns, and Ravens. But let's start with the players that we've watched recently and just kind of go through some players that, the last week or so since the last time we spoke that we've had in the film room, that we've been breaking down some things that stand out and really what people can maybe expect from some of these names as they write them down and circle back through the draft process. So do you want to start? I know you've been posting some film clips on a specific Temple offensive lineman I'm sure you're eager to talk about.
Yeah, Matt Hennessey, the center out of Temple. Really impressive. He was at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, so that's when I first got wave of him. But guys played pretty well all throughout his college career at Temple. What I really like, and sometimes you don't necessarily hear this about interior offensive linemen, but I really like his pass protection ability. He has really clean footwork. His hands are solid. I really, we talk about hand work all the time at length on this podcast, but I think it gets overshadowed sometimes by some of the footwork and some of more, of those physical, anchor tools, other things like that. But your handwork can really control the balance in your all around your leverage and technique as a blocker. So he has really good handwork in the sense where he keeps his hands square, he keeps his body square, he can sit there and distribute the weight and focus on his target and wherever it may be. So I really like what I see with Hennessey so far. He moves well laterally. He has a good enough anchor to sustain some of that contact. And I just think he's really caught my eye lately, and I think he's a candidate to be I don't say an early day 2 pick, but I think late round 2 is in the conversation just based on the film I've gotten to so far.
He really stood out at the Senior Bowl. I mean, that was a guy that you didn't really know much about him going in, and then you're watching drills, and it was like every day he flashed something. So I'm excited about him for sure. He's a player that I think is, like you mentioned, probably in that day 2 conversation. It's tough to gauge exactly where he's going to go. And I like how you brought up Tyler Biadasz on Twitter. When we were talking about it, I had made a comment and we kind of went back and forth about it. But, I think it's kind of interesting. I'm curious now, which one would get drafted first, Tyler Biadasz or Matt Hennessey? I think it would be Biadasz, but I mean, to your point, you think they're pretty close. So do you prefer one over the other, or are they around the same?
Right now, I do have Biadasz still ranked higher. He's my 4th ranked interior offensive lineman. Hennessey sits at 5 right now. In the regards to that tweet, I was saying they're close just based on as a grade goes. But I think they're also close as a projection goes too. Just projection in the draft, I should say, because I think they both kind of deal with similar issues, but they also show similar strengths. They may not have that overwhelming length, even though Hennessey is at 6'4", I think, give or take about 310 pounds. They both have clean feet, in my opinion. I think Hennessey's overall anchor is a little better. Biadasz can get a little overwhelmed sometimes, maybe due to lack of arm length, that the defenders can get into his chest and control him a little more. I think Hennessey shows a little more technique and a little more power in that regard. But it may just depend on certain schemes. I think Hennessey is a little more scheme versatile maybe than Biadasz might be. But from a projection standpoint, I think they're probably on par with each other. But it seems like Biadasz, just based on his stock right now, it doesn't seem all that favorable. But then again, his stock is based on draft media, not necessarily what the NFL teams are thinking at the moment.
The player I have is, I've got 3 players written down, but I'll start at the top. And I wrote about him. You guys can see the most recent piece I've written about Ezra Cleveland, the left tackle out of Boise State. We probably talked about him briefly during the combine, just simply because he blew it up. He ran the 40 in 4.93 seconds. His 3-cone drill was 7.26 seconds, and his short shuttle was 4.46 seconds, which was all the best times for any offensive lineman. And outside of that, he had 30 reps in the bench. So, I mean, he looks every bit of an athlete, and teams drool over that. I mean, that's why, teams really liked Jason Spriggs a few years ago out of Indiana, and he didn't necessarily pan out because he didn't have the best technique in the world. He struggled with anchoring, and some of his lower body and just overall balance wasn't there. But, for Cleveland, he's 6'6", 311, more than likely a top 50 pick. I know I said we're not going to talk first rounders, but there is a chance that he could sneak into the back end of the first round. I know I've seen some people say he's a top 15 pick. I don't agree with that, but he's, 40 career games as a starter, or 40 game starter, I should say. I love his patience. He's very, very patient. He's got really good technique, just from a, playing square, hands inside type of stuff. He's very patient with that initial punch. So he will let defensive linemen, edge rushers come to him. And I love that, because there's so many times that you see players rush through the process and then they end up oversetting or just being too aggressive and they can't recover. So Cleveland puts himself in position every time to be successful. Plus you have that upside. So the upside is there for him, you have the athletic ability. So the upside is there for him. So I like Cleveland quite a bit. I think, he makes a lot of sense for teams in the back end of the first round, like Miami, if they still have pick 26. Green Bay's an interesting choice. Can he play right tackle? If they drafted him at 30, I think he could. And then obviously I'm probably more comfortable with him, though, in the early portion of the second round. So teams like Cincinnati, maybe Cleveland, if they don't take an offensive tackle in the first round. maybe they could consider him in the second round. The Colts as well are an interesting fit as well. So I think he's going to have some suitors for sure, and we'll see how that goes with him. Do you have another player or two that you want to dive into before I go on to my players?
Yeah, I got one more, and just sticking on the offensive line theme. Why not? Because that's just who we are. But I started looking a little more in detail into Isaiah Wilson, the right tackle out of Georgia. And he has a lot of physical intrigue. I mean, the guy, he has a lot of upper body strength. I mean, he's throwing guys outside of the film viewing, and he just shows a lot of that determination, a lot of that grit. He has some technique flaws. I mean, I think his feet are fine. He moves well laterally, moves well to the second level, but I think his target is a little sporadic. His hands are kind of all over the place, but he has such a heavy punch that sometimes it doesn't necessarily matter that his hands may not be on par where they need to be, because he packs so much in his initial punch where it can kind of stagnate the pass rushers, or depending on, what the run fits are on that defense. But I think Wilson, he still has a lot of intrigue just based on the physical skill set he brings to the table. Still just a redshirt sophomore, but 35.5-inch arms, 6'5", 350 pounds. So you're looking at this big mauling guy.
Huge.
He definitely plays like it. He doesn't leave any of the physicality on the field, in my opinion, but maybe just cleaning up a little bit of technique. I think you're going to see this guy maybe come off the board a lot earlier than we anticipate, because I think he brings just a lot of physical intrigue. And that's not to say that he's not what's the right word? He's not a poor prospect in this sense, but he shows a lot more intrigue in the sense where he's getting better week by week. And I think that's something you saw continually throughout the season for Georgia. So Isaiah Wilson's definitely got to keep an eye on as far as maybe a round two guy that needs a need at right tackle.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he could go a lot sooner, just simply because of some of those physical tools that you're talking about. I mean, he's just such a massive human being. I mean, Andrew Thomas is no slouch, and you put them next to each other, and it's like, wow, they're not even the same size. It's insane. It's insane. I mean, he's a massive human. And I like him quite a bit. He's like a poor man's Mekhi Becton on the right side almost. Yeah. But sticking to the offensive line, I've got Cesar Ruiz out of Michigan. That's a guy I've been watching the last 2-3 days. And, 6'3", 307, athletic for sure, quick feet. He's got 11-inch hands, over 33-inch arms, I think 33 1/8. I like him in space, but I do have an issue with kind of his footwork and his lower body just control when attacking the second level, when getting up into the second level. There was just times that his feet didn't necessarily follow through on contact when he was making that initial contact or initial punch at the second level. So I'm a little worried there, but overall, I mean, he's quick off the snap. He's, consistent with double teams and down blocks. I love his natural knee bending ability and just overall his ability to transfer his weight from set foot to post foot and back and forth. Just it was impressive. He did pretty well against Penn State, and I watched him against Ohio State and then a Maryland game and then the Michigan State game. And I think he's a talented kid for sure that should intrigue a lot of teams. And again, one of those guys that people keep circling into the first round, and maybe he does go at like 17 with the Dallas Cowboys now that Travis Frederick surprisingly retired, which I guess we could talk briefly about if we wanted to. But there's plenty of interior offensive linemen, like you mentioned, Matt Hennessey, Tyler Biotish. I think that would be fits for the Cowboys there. So I don't know if Cesar Ruiz is necessarily that guy, but people that have him in the top 25, I kind of question it just a little bit. I'm not saying he's, bad, but I don't see a top 25 player. Again, one of those guys I have a top 40 grade on. I'm more comfortable again with him at, 35, 37, 38, because he's at 38 on my board. So I'm more comfortable with him there, but I like him quite a bit. I like his aggressiveness, so I'm not going to take anything away from him. But I think people that are saying, he could be a top 15 player, top 20 player, I think it's just a little rich. But I mean, anything is possible, so we'll see.
Is he your top-rated interior lineman, or is that still Biotish?
No, it's him. He
Okay.
Jumped ahead of Biotish, but Biotish isn't far behind. I mean, for Tyler, he's at 52. So, I mean, it's 14 spots, but it's not a huge gap. I mean, there's a ton of, and that's as I've think we've all seen with my grading scale just the last 2-3 years, it's like 0.27 of a point that separates these players. So it's just one of those things. Maybe my grading scale is just flawed, but the last player I was going to talk about was Gabriel Davis out of Central Florida. And we've got some Central Florida tape in there, and I was watching him. And I mean, first of all, their quarterback is just a giant question mark, because he'll make some impressive throws on the run, and then he makes some idiotic decisions other times when he's clean in the pocket. But Davis at 6'2", 215, I really like him. One team that I circled to, like on day 3 of the draft, because I think he's a day 3 player, I circled to the Green Bay Packers. I think he'd be an ideal fit for them, just with how they're, they don't, it doesn't seem like they put the importance in the wide receiver position right now, despite having, I think, a need there. They're taking guys like Elam and they're developing those types of players. And you've got ESB, and now you've got Gabriel Davis. So, well, you don't have him yet, but I think you could put him on their radar, because I think he would be an interesting fit with the 35-inch vertical, 4'5", 440. But really, what I liked about him was just, I like how he was able to catch it with his hands away from his body. He wasn't, catching with his shoulder pads or anything like that. I like some of his hand movement when trying to get away from, press coverage and some of the coverage that was there. I thought he high pointed pretty well, and I thought he just tracked the ball pretty well overall. So he's an interesting player with size, not grade A athletic ability. We're not talking Henry Ruggs here, but we are talking about a player that I think can get downfield and knows some of the hand techniques needed to create some of that separation and get downfield to create a window. But overall, I think a day 3 player for sure. Like him quite a bit. So keep your tabs on him if you're a wide receiver guy or wide receiver person in the draft.
What I struggle with Davis's evaluation is when watching him, because UCF sends him a lot of times just as far on the boundary as possible. Just let him go get the deep ball for every reason that you said. Excellent ball tracking skills. He can high point the football. He has a really good job of not really giving away the ball when it's on its way. And so he does a really good job getting to the deep parts of the field. I don't know how much he can win on the intermediate levels. That's my biggest thing with him, because he shows that he has, I think he ran like a 4.53, 4.55 or something like that.
Yeah, 4.54.
So he has good enough speed to play the outside, but similar to kind of like how Michael Pittman is at USC. If you want to kind of compare the tape, they played very similar in a sense, because they both won a lot of deep balls. They both won in some physical contests in the red zone. Both had trustworthy hands for the most part. I know Davis struggled with some drops this past season, but can they consistently win over the middle of the field? Those are that's my biggest issues with those two prospects. I think Pittman maybe gives you a little more explosion in that short area, but that's my biggest thing with Davis. But if you're, again, like you said, if he's a day 3 prospect, I don't think that's necessarily a risk, because I think the reward could be exponential, when you boil it down to everything. So that's just my biggest knock, I guess, or my biggest question mark with Davis so far.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too is, like we've mentioned, it's athletic ability with him, but I think it's just more so like with his hips. There's so many guys with like fluid hips and everything, where he's a little bit more stiff, a little bit more tighter up in his hips. So, I think if he can, get some of that lower body just moving a little bit faster and a little bit more fluid, I think it would certainly help him. But I agree. He's constantly going deep down the field, but he, again, like I mentioned, he high points well, he can track the ball. So we'll see. Where he ends up ultimately, maybe he's a round 4 guy, maybe he's a late day 3 guy, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was in that, late round 4, early round 5 discussion. And, teams like Green Bay would make a lot of sense. Maybe a team like Minnesota, who, they are bringing in Tajay Sharp to maybe be their wide receiver too, but maybe they bring in, yikes, right? You're a Titans fan, and, maybe they bring in like a guy like Gabe Davis and we see what happens. So those are some players that we've been watching recently. You guys can catch up with all of those film evaluations not so much in article form. As for Cleveland, I've got one on. I'm sure CP will have some stuff, but you can check it out on Twitter as we post clips periodically throughout the day and throughout the week. So find us on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft, at _Christian Page. Smash the follow button and get all that film. So let's do our draft options per division. We'll start with one division per week, I guess, and if we need more, if we need to do a couple extra divisions, maybe we'll do 2 in a show or something. But let's start with the AFC North. We simply did this because the Bengals had the first pick, and that's what we did. So let's start with the Bengals. I mean, this is a team that, they've got their 7 picks. They've got, picks first through the 7th round. So we all kind of expect Joe Burrow at 1, but I've got a piece I'm writing about building around Burrow, and that should be available tonight for you or whoever else to edit. And then, it should post tomorrow, I would assume, but we'll see. But what do you think this team does at picks 33, 65, just later in the draft, and really what strategy should they go about?
Yeah, well, they really did some work in the offseason just within the past couple of weeks, because they addressed their need at nose tackle. DJ Reader comes over from Houston. They must have thought very highly of Minnesota's secondary, which Minnesota's secondary was nothing too sharp this past year, but they signed Mackenzie Alexander and Trey Waynes, so they looked to address the cornerback position there. So they did hit a lot of needs in free agency so far. Obviously, the biggest need is going to be at quarterback. We think that they're going to take that at number 1. So when you're looking at picks, they're picking the 2nd round, you're probably looking at maybe just a more consistent pass rusher. I don't know how long Carlos Dunlap is going to be penciled in with Cincinnati. And I think just maybe some linebacker help overall wouldn't be a bad direction to go in. So when you're looking at maybe those early few picks in the 2nd round, you're going to look at maybe – I'm trying to think of some edge rushers that might be available in that sense, but you're going to look at guys that maybe can be a little versatile as far as, that edge role / hand in the dirt type role. Maybe a Marlon Davidson might fit in from a 3-4.
That's a good fit.
Yeah, from kind of a, can move from a 3-4 into a 4-3 alignment. That's exactly what he did in Kevin Steele's defense at Auburn. So I think that may be a situation that they could look at, and maybe some of those guys that are not necessarily tweeners but have a little more versatile skill set. I think Cincinnati should look to address the pass rushing need. And, heck, you can never have too many pass rushers, of course, especially maybe in a division now where you're looking to kind of key in on a guy that likes to really move around in the pocket. You got to keep him home in Lamar Jackson. So I think pass rusher would be definitely a primary need for Cincinnati outside of quarterback.
Yeah, Julian Okwara would be a good fit for them as well. I mean, that could be a potential landing spot at 33 because I think he's got some first-round potential to him. Zach Vaughn as well could be a first-round guy. I know some people have him in the top 20, and they're talking possibly him at Atlanta, maybe Miami at 18, or even Dallas at 17. So we'll see what happens there. But if Zach Vaughn's there at 33, that'd be a home run for a guy that can stand up and obviously I think has the athletic ability to contain a guy. Containing Lamar's freaking impossible, but we'll see. But, my draft plan is a little bit different. I like what they've done from a free agency perspective, just adding those pieces to the defense. I mean, Mackenzie Alexander and Trey Waynes, they're not great, but I think they're upgrades over what they've had. DJ Reader is certainly an upgrade. And they added Von Bell, who's more of that box safety, playing, in the mid area of the field, probably that mid hook defender more so than anything, almost like a linebacker essentially. He's not a great coverage safety, but I think he'll do. So I think just them going this route shows that, yeah, you're probably right. They'll look at an edge rusher, but I think, and maybe I'm just being, I don't know. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but maybe I'm just going with what my article is preaching, that they need to build around Joe Burrow, and I think they need to do it in this draft. And I think that they could, at pick 33, if Cesar Ruiz or Ezra Cleveland are there, they need to revamp their offensive line. They got rid of Cordy Glenn. Bobby Hart is not a viable option at right tackle. Michael Jordan's a work in progress. Billy Price, if he can stay healthy, you never know. But, they just need help along that offensive line. And I know they've got A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, John Ross, but they lost Tyler Eifert. Joe Mixon was really up and down this past year, which was really odd. So I think just putting pieces around him to be successful. And I think if, depending on where they value a guy like T. Higgins, maybe he's a guy at 33. He would make a lot of sense. I know his pro day wasn't great. He's not the athlete that we really thought he was going to be. But I mean, he's a jump ball specialist. He's a red zone target. And I think he could be efficient for a guy like Joe Burrow, who's going to need a player of that size, that caliber type of player, I think, in an offense like that, especially considering that A.J. Green's been unhealthy for the last several years. So I think that they should put those resources in. I think they need to look at tight end. Maybe they get at like 107 or something. They get Thad Moss out of LSU. I know he's not a number one receiving type of threat, but just getting a familiar face in that offense with Joe Burrow, I think makes a lot of sense. And so many times we see young quarterbacks get paired with the tight end. I mean, the Lions did it with Matthew Stafford in the same draft. They traded back into the first round, got Brandon Pettigrew. And you just see it so many times where they get tight ends and they put those pieces around him. Lamar Jackson, he's got Mark Andrews and stuff like that. So we'll see. But I think that they should build around their offense, look at receivers. If T. Higgins isn't there, I think Van Jefferson would be a good fit out of Florida, just simply because, he wins in all three areas of the field, really those short and intermediate areas of the field especially. So I think he could be a weapon there. And so that, I mean, the Bengals 7 picks, it's tough. I agree, though. There should be an edge rusher in there as well. I mean, maybe they do it at 33 and then the rest of the draft is offense. So we'll see what they do. But the Browns would be next on the clock for the AFC North, and they picked 10th. They've got picks 10, 41, 74, 97, which is a comp pick from Houston. Then they've got a fourth, a sixth, and a seventh round draft pick. So, four picks in the top 100 really isn't that bad. They can do some damage there. They've done some things via free agency. Jack Conklin, we both talked about last week as a signing that we really liked. And they've done some good in free agency. But what direction do you think that they go in this draft? And what's the pivotal – I don't know, the pivotal goal for them to achieve for the next step this coming season?
Yeah, well, the pivotal goal they need to achieve in the draft is getting a left tackle on their roster, because I don't even know if they have one right now. Because Greg Robinson wanted to do stupid stuff, and he's going to be behind bars for quite some time. Jack Conklin fills a need at right tackle, though there are some consistency issues on and off the field from a physical and injury perspective, maybe shoring up some things in the interior offensive line, which I think it's good enough. Nick Chubb really took advantage of I should probably reverse and say that. He did a lot with not that much as far as the offensive line goes. So he really did a great job at showing what the potential is for this offense going forward. But now they're under a little of a new regime, so we'll have to see what the identity is going forward. But I think at that pick 10, I don't care who the tackle is, you got to go the left tackle direction. I know Mekhi Becton's been a hot name there, but now, there's possibility that he's not even there. Andrew Thomas, the left tackle out of Georgia, could
love
be
the fit.
I think that's one of the better fits. If they are going to play in between the tackles, they are going to feature the run game, which they should, even though I know they got high dollars on the outside at the wide receiver and tight end position. They do need to focus on the run to open the pass, because Baker Mayfield needs some pressure off his shoulders, whether he put that pressure on himself or whatever it may be with Freddie Kitchens in that background. But I think, they need to stick with running the ball as a primary option with an all-star caliber running back like Nick Chubb. And so that would be addressing a left tackle in a run mauling type of offensive tackle with Andrew Thomas, who is also a very solid pass protector. So that's definitely the identity they need to go in the draft. I do think they should probably look in the secondary as well. I think Jeremy Chin would be a nice piece in the secondary for Cleveland, add some versatility. Not necessarily maybe a plug-and-play guy at every position, but I think he gives you a little bit of more versatility, a little more comfort in that secondary to play some man-on-man coverage in safety situations, or even line up in the slot and play against some of the receivers there. So I think Jeremy Chin's a good versatile chess piece in that secondary. That would be a really good complementary piece for Cleveland.
That would be a lot of fun. I like that fit a lot. I also like the thought of them maybe going after one of our guys, Jalen Johnson out of Utah.
Oh, yeah.
I think that would be an ideal fit as well for them. I agree, though, Andrew Thomas at 10, if he's there, run to the podium. I think he's just a fit for them. I love it. I can see it today. And I agree. They got to keep establishing the run. They added Austin Hooper. They've got OBJ, Jarvis Landry. So they got the pieces on the outside, in the middle, and they can run the football. But, you got to get a left tackle. You got to make sure that you've got both sides of those tackle spots taken care of. And they can do that in this draft. They're fortunate that they can do it in the draft. But Jalen Johnson for sure. They added Carl Joseph and Kevin Johnson. I don't really, those shouldn't excite you too much. And BJ Goodson, the linebacker, that shouldn't excite you either. They lost Joe Schobert, so they have to look at linebacker, I think. And I don't know if there'll be one at 41. I doubt Patrick Queen or Kenneth Murray will be there. But if they get to 74 or 97 and Joe Bocci out of Michigan State is there, I think he's one of the guys that's probably fallen under the radar the most in that, mid to late day 2 conversation, just simply because of the PEDs suspension that he had and just kind of the way the Michigan State program went this past year. But he's an instinctive player. He was productive 2 years in a row. He had over 100 tackles. He's a pretty good athlete. I mean, he tested really well at the combine. So I think he's a guy certainly, he's from Ohio. So I certainly think, Cleveland would embrace him. And I think certainly he would be a player to keep an eye on if you're a Browns fan. So I think for me, it's getting a left tackle. It's getting another number, not a number one, but getting a quality cornerback and then a linebacker in this draft, probably within, the 3 picks of the 4 picks that they have in the top 100, I think that makes the most sense for them. But, we'll see. And if Kareem Hunt can stay on the field and everything works out, then, they've got a pretty good 1-2 punch if everything works out the way it's supposed to. So we'll see how that goes about. But moving on to the next team, and this team does not have a first-round pick, but they do have Minkah Fitzpatrick, so it worked out for them. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, they do not have a draft pick until 49th overall. Then they have 102, 124, 135, and then a 6th and a 7th round pick. So they've got to try to do a lot with a little, I guess you could say. What's our take here? I mean, what are you thinking they do come the draft?
Yeah, they are a little interesting situation because if you look at their roster top to bottom, it's not bad at all. I mean, you look at all of their pieces on defense. If you're looking at just the foundation pieces on defense, you got guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt, Devin Bush. Like, those are 3 very solid pieces going forward for this defense. And you still got guys like Cameron Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, and I think Bud Dupree got the franchise tag, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe if they're looking on moving away from Bud Dupree, depending on their long-term situation there in their cap space for next year, a guy that may be kind of favorable as far as Bud Dupree's, I don't want to say unique role in Pittsburgh, but kind of plays a little bit of that rush role, but also drops back into coverage, a little bit of off-ball coverage as well. A guy like Anthony Jennings out of Alabama would be a really good fit, in my opinion. I know there's some injury baggage with him, and maybe where they're picking with their first pick is a little rich based on some of the baggage, quote unquote, that he may have. But I think a guy that comes from a similar defensive scheme, has a lot of a really attractive pass rushing ability, plays good against the run, and is just a smart overall football player. I would really like to see Jennings in a Steelers uniform because I think it would be nice for him to learn under Dupree and then take that next step forward, maybe next year, depending on how his injury status goes going forward. So I think Jennings in Pittsburgh would be a really fun fit just from a personal perspective.
I like that fit a lot. I think if there's any team that could get the most out of Jennings, it would be the Steelers and Mike Tomlin. So I really like that quite a bit. But yeah, it's hard to put kind of an idea of what's going to be there at 49. I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's the first round's tough alone. The Bengals were a little easy. I mean, Joe Burrow, that's easy. You either build around them or you put some more pieces on defense, whatever. But for the Steelers, I mean, there's not a huge need. I think, though, going after another wide receiver makes a lot of sense for them. The player that makes sense if he's there. Certainly at 49, Brandon Ayuk out of Arizona State. I think maybe we've kind of forgotten about him a little bit. I think the draft is somewhat forgotten about him. We talked so much about him a few months ago, and here we are now. And, you're not really hearing that first round buzz anymore. So maybe he falls into that top 50 category, and he'll be an early to mid second round pick somewhere. But I think if the Steelers were there at 49 and he's available, I think that's a home run, just pairing him up with Juju, James Washington. They do have to consider a tight end. I mean, Vance McDonald, nothing against them, but they've got to find a way to get somebody. And maybe it's Bryson Hopkins out of Purdue. I think that would be a great fit. I know they added Eric Ebron, but it's only a 2-year deal. So maybe they just, they're waiting for next year's class, and they'll do with it with what they need to do. But, they added Eric Ebron, but I would still be wanting another tight end if I were them, just simply because I think you could get a decent depth signing or draft pick at 124, 135, and maybe Hopkins is there, maybe not. I mean, maybe it's Harrison or Hunter Bryant, one of those two dudes, but I think that they should consider one of those spots. I like that you said edge rusher, though. It's just, do they do that at 49? Do they do that at 102? And then if we get to 102, I mean, is it Anthony Jennings if it's 102, or are you saying he's more at 49?
In between. It's hard because I just don't know. It seems like there's such a wide range where he's going to fall because, last year at this time we're looking at Jennings being a, top 25, at least a first round pick. And then now we're looking at possibly a late day 3 guy. So I don't know. It's kind of, they're kind of stuck in a bad situation as far as picks go. I just think schematically that would be a really good fit for him. And I think Pittsburgh would definitely be excited to put them in that scheme. But I don't know, kind of somewhere in that 75 to 90 range would probably be the best landing spot for Jennings. But I don't think too many people would scratch their heads if he went at 49.
You know who would also be a really good fit for them? Jabari Zuniga. It just clicked. That would also be pretty ideal for them at, 6'3", 264. So, I mean, I think those would be certainly 2 guys that you could consider. It's interesting to where Zuniga is going to go because the upside is there, but he hasn't been able to stay on the field long enough for you to really get an understanding of what he can provide. Outside of that, he's explosive as hell. And, he's not the longest player in the league, but he understands how to utilize the length that he has. So, I think those would be certainly 2 guys to certainly consider. But, that's the Steelers. I mean, every time you think that they're going to do one thing, they do a completely opposite thing. I don't think they'll draft a quarterback in this draft. I'll be honest. I think they're, with how this roster is kind of built, they're going to just kind of look at how can we win now and try to do this thing one more time with Big Ben. And I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know if there's a quarterback that they would really like at 102, 124, like passing on, let's say, Jennings or Zuniga to take Anthony Gordon or Jake Fromm might be, I don't know. Yeah, that doesn't help. So
one more thing on the Steelers real quick. I don't think addressing the cornerback position is out of the question here. I know they've had, sometimes, Joe Hayden, I don't know how much he has left in the tank. Steven Nelson's fine, but and then Mike Hilton, there's ups and downs with him as well. So I think maybe you're looking at pick 49. I think a guy like Damon Arnett out of Ohio State would be a pretty good fit. They can play on the outside pretty well. Very physical corner, and I think they need that true lockdown guy when Minkah Fitzpatrick is more playing as that primary safety and maybe more of a scheme matchup depending on who's on the field on the offense. But I think them addressing the cornerback position needs to happen at some point in this draft. Maybe not their first pick, but I think there's a lot of – I like this cornerback class as a whole, but it is a little top-heavy. So if they have a way to get maybe one of those top 7 to 8 corners, they maybe should take advantage of it with that top 50 pick.
Yeah, well, and they should also – I mean, they should consider too. I mean, a nose tackle. They need to consider somebody down in the trenches just in that 3-4 alignment that they – often run. And I mean, Neville Gallimore makes a lot of sense. He provides versatility. He's kind of that natural interior, zero shade, nose tackle type of player, and 4.79 40. The 3-cone drill is not going to excite anybody. He plays a little high with his pad level when he's flipping his hips and turning the corner and everything. But at 6'2", 304, and just that versatility and that motor, I mean, I know he's a little bit undersized, but I think he would be, he'd be a workhorse for them. 49 might be the pick that you have to do it, but he's certainly a player to circle too. So, yeah, I mean, the Steelers have a lot of options. There's I don't think that they have a wrong answer. You know what I mean? I think any player that they take at 49, 102 could be guys that contribute right away, to be quite honest with you. So we'll see how that goes. But the Baltimore Ravens next on the list, and then we'll close this thing out. But they've got quite a few picks. They got 2 second-round picks, they've got 2 third-round picks, and they've got pick 28 in the first round. Altogether, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. They've got 9 picks in this draft. So, I mean, kind of like the Steelers, take your pick. What do you think they do? I mean, I don't think they can go wrong when they have Lamar Jackson at QB right now.
No, not at all. I mean, of course, like you're saying, with building around your quarterback, I think there are some still positional needs that they could address. I think at some point in this draft, they need to look at the running back position. I know Justice Hill was a draft pick for them out of Oklahoma State, and I know Mark Ingram had a very solid year. I mean, the guy is one of the more consistent backs in the league. Sure, he may not ever reach that all-star status, but he brings consistency to the table every single time. So maybe just another depth piece at running back, see how they go in preseason and then make the call then. But also I think adding another receiver is going to be something that they need to do. They got, Hollywood Brown in round 1 a year ago. Obviously, they're not going to go out for a receiver that early, but in this receiver class, they definitely need to take advantage of getting maybe more of a bigger body guy that can kind of work the intermediate areas of the field. Somebody like a T. Higgins, I think, would be a really good spot for him. Can kind of play, scrape over the middle a little bit. Can also be that deep ball receiver. Somebody like Denzel Mims would also, I think, be a good fit for Lamar Jackson, what Baltimore wants to do. So I think they could probably also address some of the interior offensive line, maybe with their first pick. You're looking at guys like maybe late in the draft, or late in the first round, like a Lloyd Cushenberry, maybe Cesar Ruiz. I don't know if they want to really address the center position, but he seems like he has a little more technique and just high football IQ to play multiple positions up in the offensive line. So offensively, I think they do need to look at the wide receiver and the offensive line and maybe the running backs. Defense, they have to decide what they're going to do long-term with Matthew Judon. Kind of plays that little bit of that off-ball role as well, kind of plays the flats, but is also a pretty skilled pass rusher as well. So somebody that could maybe play both, which comes to, I think, one of the better fits that we've talked about this evening would be Zach Bond, the outside linebacker / edge player out of Wisconsin. I think he could do something very similar to how Matt Judon is used in Baltimore's system. So if they are looking forward or are looking to move away from Judon long term, he's on the franchise tag now. Bond would be, I think, an excellent replacement, and drafting him late in the first round would not be a reach by any means.
No, it wouldn't. But dude, their defensive line is just a freaking cheat code. It's a Madden team put together. Michael Brockers, Brandon Williams, Calais Campbell, and then you've got Judon as well. Like you mentioned, off the ball and doing those types of things. I mean, I agree, though. I think Zach Bond would certainly be a nice replacement. I think you could deal Judon, probably get some more picks for next year, and just kind of just keep doing that and see how it goes. But, they've got to be an early favorite right now in the AFC to compete against the Chiefs and maybe just win the whole thing next year. We'll see. They've got to get a right guard. Replacing Marshall Yanda is not going to be easy to do, but I mean, it's a good interior offensive line class, in my personal opinion. I like, as a depth guy later in this draft, Justin Herron from Wake Forest. He played some guard at the Senior Bowl. He played pretty well. He's got kind of that swing tackle ability if you needed him to. He didn't test great, though, which was a little surprising because he's got pretty good footwork, but it was a weird I don't know, weird year for him at the combine. It was odd, but Damian Lewis out of LSU would also, I think, be a good fit for them, just especially in the run game for what he provides. So that's certainly a guy. Shane Lemieux out of Oregon, I think, would also provide that versatility. He could play center, he could play guard, and maybe even a little bit of tackle if you needed him to. So I like those three names for them on their offensive line. But again, 9 picks, they've got a lot of ammo. They can do a lot in this draft. What do you think, just off of what you think right now, and so many people care about that first round, what do you think that first pick would be if it was today?
Probably just the best pass rusher that's available, maybe. I think that would probably be the direction they're going in. And it could be the best wide receiver available too. And I know I just said they're not going to go back-to-back first-round wide receivers, but given just some of the quality that may be available at that point, I don't think it should hurt to take best player available. And all of all the positions we just ran down, there's not necessarily a need for all of them, but there could be a spot for them on the roster. I know that sounds very vague, but when you're looking at maybe adding another piece as a secondary, they could look at a safety position. And, I don't know if a Grant Delpit's available, if that could be a fit that they would like to, partner with there in the secondary with a guy like Earl Thomas. So I don't know. I think they just need to take the best player available route because their roster is pretty stacked overall, but maybe they do look at interior offensive line. Maybe they're that first team that, takes a interior offensive line in the latter part of the first round. Everybody forgets about it, and then they end up becoming an all-pro. We've seen that all the time. It happens in the NFL draft once out of every 3 years. So maybe Baltimore takes that step forward, especially being primarily a rushing team. They do need to address what's going on up front. So maybe they do take an interior offensive line with their first-round pick.
I mean, I like that you said Denzel Mims earlier. So what if, it went like Ravens fans, just at me, at Russ NFL Draft. How about this? Denzel Mims at 28. At 55, you go, let's go Kyle Duggar, Lenore Ryan. At 60, let's go Josh Uche out of Michigan. And then at 92, take your pick at whichever offensive lineman you want. Let's say Damian Lewis is there, or even one of our guys, John Simpson out of Clemson. And now you got your starting right guard. How does that sound? I think that sounds pretty good. So we'll see. But yeah, they've got, again, tons of picks, 2 picks in the 4th round, a pick in the 5th round, and a 7th round pick. But the Ravens, they've got to be an early favorite going into the year right now for the Super Bowl and just being one of the best teams in the National Football League next year. And they've got a ton of ammo in this draft. So, CP, you got anything else for me?
I think that's it. Right now I'm currently I'm kind of off the scene right now because I'm working on more of like data pieces and research pieces. So I'm charting all the offensive linemen and just all their games and what positions they started at throughout their career. So I'm working on that. And then I'm also getting help with working on some of the running back and wide receiver charts, charting some of the drops, getting that research information, total touches for running backs and fumble rates. So Jonathan Taylor is going to be very high on the fumble rate because he had 18 total fumbles in his career. I know he had like 900 carries, but that's definitely something that's going to push him maybe away from some people as far as just, where they stack up as far as a running back needs. So definitely something to look forward probably next week, depending on when I get all that information wrapped up.
It's crazy to me. Jonathan Taylor, 18th. It was one of the most surprising stats when I came across that, a few months back and everything. I'm like, dude, that is freaking insane. But he is so talented. He's still running back one, in my opinion. So, of course, you guys can –
fumbles, and I think he had 4 drops on only 25 receptions last year. So, I don't know. He has ball security issue. He needs to clean that up for sure.
Yes, he does. But that's all right. Put him in my backfield. We'll be good. He'll be healthier than Kerryon Johnson, that's for sure. And that's not a shot at Auburn. I'm sorry. That's not an Auburn shot.
Easy.
Hostile out here. But yeah, all right, cool. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for joining me. Everybody be safe out there. I know it's tough times, do your best. Hopefully we are giving you some alternate content to kind of ease your mind and just, keep your positivity going and focused on the draft. So be sure to smash the follow button on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft, at _Christian Page. Like I said, download the Cover One app. Do us a favor while you're quarantined in your home. Go ahead, find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spreaker, wherever you go about listening to your podcast. Search Cover One NFL Draft Podcast, and you will find us. Subscribe, download, rate, review, do all the goods for us. We appreciate your time. We hope you stay safe. Until next time, this is Cover One, the Draft Podcast.